Okay, so this is very different to the kind of stuff that is happening at COP, right? This is very much, we need action now in a very real, tangible way. As Kelly said, there are those who are already committed and are passionate about this. How do we engage the others? How do we make this real in the kind of way David talks about it? How do you make it real to people who've got jobs to hold down, who've got daily lives to live? How do you make this their passion project?
Sure. Well, it's a really good question. I mean, I think before talking about that, I somewhat disagree with the idea that we don't want to keep talking to the people that are on our side. Because I think that actually lots of us care about this issue. There was just a poll that came out in the United States that said 83% of people want more action on climate change. We have huge email lists of people reach, but we're not figuring out ways to mobilize ourselves and use our own power to actually create change. So I do believe we need to put a lot of effort into reaching new people. We also need to look within ourselves and within rooms like this and within our own movement and say, with this many people, what could we do? With this many people, just the people in this room, we could go out and do some pretty creative actions. And it would get a lot of media and it could make a really big impact. So as much as we keep thinking, oh, I just have to convince everybody else, start by convincing yourself to be able to do the types of things that can make an impact. Now that said, how can we reach other people? Because we do need to reach them. One, I think it's talking about the opportunities that come with this transition, showing people that this isn't just about reducing emissions, but about making our cities more livable, creating more bike lanes, creating more economic opportunities for young people, trying to solve the jobs crisis in Europe, in the United States, in the global South. I mean, if you guys are, a lot of folks are my age, younger, we're falling off a cliff here. We don't have the jobs that our parents did often. We don't have those opportunities. Climate change can help create that because of the transition we're going through. I think second is beginning to make it fun and interesting. We put out a video where we tried to take politicians who are climate deniers, and we said instead of naming all these hurricanes like after poor people, like Hurricane Sandy, like Sandy didn't do anything. Why'd we name a hurricane after her? We should name it like Hurricane John Boehner, who's the climate denier politician in the US. Make him put his name on the hurricane, because that's what's going on. That video got 2 million views in a couple hours or a couple days. So it went really well because people said, that's pretty funny, that's pretty slick. So I think having fun with it, being creative, talking about the opportunities, and also showing that there's a real way for people to engage, that actually pulls a lot of people in. Because we can't keep talking to ourselves. We do need to get more people on board, and then together we can figure out the ways that we can all take action.
Totally agree with that, and I think we need to recognize that not everyone is comfortable being an activist or doing civil disobedience. I think we need a full spectrum of people involved, and I think Jamie's absolutely right. We need to mobilize the people who do feel passionately already and get them to take stronger action. We need to get some people who've never been engaged before to take the very first step on what we call the ladder of engagement. And that may be just something like signing a petition. One of the things we'll have on this Now Is Our Moment website are different things people can do. Changing, the way you make purchases, changing the way if you have money to invest in things, why don't invest in things that are going to help us move towards a green economy. So, there's a big initiative where children in the United States are suing in every single state. They're suing the government for their inaction on climate change. There's just all different ways you can come at this issue. And what we need to do is get people to just get out of their initial comfort zone and go a step further than they were before. And we think once they do that, they'll be prepared to kind of climb higher on this ladder of engagement.
David, you wanted to add something to that?
Start where you are. You know your network of friends. Begin to engage them. Ask them to engage their friends. I think one of the keys, I remember sort of the recycling movement and how we began that, and it was absolutely key that we got to that sort of 10-year-old, 12-year-old group. And so I decided on my block that I would have a little meeting with the young people on my block. And it's a riot now, because I go out and I see this little girl next door, and she's saying to her mother, no, we're not going to drive to the store. It's only 12 blocks away. We can walk. Well, that's where change really begins, when young people begin to insist that for their future, their parents act in another way. So start where you are. You are part of a whole raft of networks out there. In this room, if we were to graph it, we could probably have connections with, 10,000, 20,000 people in an instant. That's what needs to be motivated now.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I take your question?
You said we cannot use unlimited coal energy because we cannot pass that vulnerable 350. So we need an alternative. Unfortunately, all that green energy is pretty expensive to set up. So there's one more very interesting option. What do you think about atomic energy?
Well, go to Japan. The cleanup cost for atomic energy, if you don't have a place to put the waste, then don't build it. And atomic energy, Eisenhower referred to it as too cheap to meter. Well, it's the most expensive energy, and it's subject to an accident. And the people of Fukushima are now living in a radioactive zone. I don't think anyone wants that anymore. Even the Germans are moving away from nuclear energy. So I don't think nuclear energy is the answer. Look up. The sun. The sun has the potential to generate massive energy. The wind has the potential to generate massive energy. Geothermal has the ability to generate massive energy. The sources of alternate energy are there, and the price difference is marginal if you count the cost of the damage that climate change is doing and is going to do.
David, I think I should put that in the context of maybe Poland, because we had Professor Kunzewicz earlier who was saying that we don't get that much sun or that much wind in Poland. I guess, I think the young man's question is given the specific context where not that much sun or wind.
And we asked the very same question about Seattle when 350.org, 2030, Architecture 2030 came out. And they said, no, it doesn't matter if the sun is shining. There is ample power from that sun that is coming to those rooftops, coming to those southern walls, that can be converted either into heat or into photovoltaic. And we're about 10 years away probably from nanotechnology making this even more effective. And wind, I don't know what wind's like in Poland, but I can't believe it's so substantially different from Germany and so substantially different from Denmark and so substantially different from a lot of places that are putting in wind energy.
Okay, well, maybe that's a discussion maybe you can take up afterwards, but Kelly, could you?
I just wanted to add one point about the cost of renewables. In fact, we don't have a level playing field. Fossil fuels are subsidized so extensively. For every $1 in subsidies to renewables, $6 in subsidies, tax breaks, whatever, are given to fossil fuels. So I think if you strip those subsidies away, you'd suddenly find that the cost comparisons are not as big as you might have thought. And I think the other thing to remember is that the price of renewables are going down rapidly. And the price of fossil fuels are going up because they're getting, in general, particularly, for example, oil. You have to keep going to deeper seas and farther away to get it. They're becoming more, the easy stuff has already been done. And I think that you remember as well that once you've constructed renewables, the fuel is free. So, there's a lot of good economic benefits for going with the renewable economy as well.
Before we ask another, I have a question for the panel. Have you thought about what the tipping point is? So, we're asking about mobilizing the people who know, getting new people to know. At what point does that, it's influencing policy is not a linear process, right? So when you have 10,000 people at this end, the politicians are going to do something at this end. But what is the thought process? Because otherwise we can have these sorts of discussions also endlessly. We need more people, we need more action, we need more campaigns. At what point do you think that, in terms of citizen participation, there will be a tipping point?
It's a good question, and it's something that we think about a lot. It's also kind of impossible to answer, but we can try. I think Wael said it really well earlier, right? That if you asked someone in Egypt, they never would have thought it, and all of a sudden, it changed. So I think that one of the things we have to do is be creative, as I said, and try a lot of different things. What could those look like? One of them is as climate change becomes more of a priority, right? When they ask people, do you care about climate change? They say, yeah, sure, but it's maybe 10 or 11 on the list, right? I care about jobs, I care about maybe the economy, but then climate's pretty low down. I think if we can find ways and moments to lift it up, whether it's in the aftermath of a terrible tragedy like the Typhoon Haiyan, and really saying that first and foremost we need to provide relief and support people. We also need to talk about the causes of this, and in other places figuring out those moments where we can begin to put people in the streets in interesting ways. So I would say I don't know where it would come from, but I think that's exactly the right question to be asking ourselves, whether it's at the global level or in a city like Warsaw or here in Poland. How do we begin to try the types of things that go for those tipping points and create that type of change? And on the last question, just briefly, it's going to be hard in Poland. Like, you guys are this is one of the hardest places to do this work. And you can take that as a challenge and say, well, that's a reason why I shouldn't do it. It's also, you could also take it as a challenge and say, that's exactly why I want to be involved in this, because if we do it here, we're going to be an example for people all around the world who will look to us and say, man, these are the people we should be following. These are the ones who really did it in a place where it was tremendously difficult. So I would say take it as a challenge that Poland's going to be hard. You should embrace that and recognize that and still commit yourselves to make that change, because if you do it here, it will be an example that the rest of the world will turn to and lift up. So don't be afraid of the challenge. It's going to be hard, you're going to get a lot of pushback, but that's exactly why it matters, and that's exactly why it's going to be one of the most fascinating places to try and make this transition over the coming years.
I would have liked to have opened that to you all, but we have to end it. So please, 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 a big round of applause for our panel. Thank you. Thank you, guys.